While the front lines in the Donbass are massively under pressure, the Ukrainians claim to have damaged or even destroyed several planes in separate strikes. ATACMS strike on the Crimean Peninsula supposedly damaged some or even destroyed some, while a Russian strategic bomber was hit close to Murmansk, so far, far away from the front line. We'll talk about this as well as about political developments, about troop generations, international aid, and so much more, and of course the developments along the front line in this situation report about the war in Ukraine. Ukraine did an ATACMS strike against the Saki airbase on the Crimean Peninsula. According to claims, a radar system as well as fuel storages have been hit. There are also claims that several planes were damaged or destroyed, but so far there is no proof. We have an image showing this here. This is currently being circulated around, showing supposedly the damage, but this is a picture from 2022. It's from that same airbase, but it was the first bigger attack on the airbase, which might have been done with Krim-2 ballistic missiles from the Ukrainians. But as said, this is not a current picture, even though it's being spread around and even though it shows several damaged and destroyed planes. At the same time, the Ukrainians claim that they hit a strategic bomber of the Russians, a Tu-22M3, at the Olenya airfield. Olenya airfield is in Murmansk, so we're talking about up here. This would mean that a Ukrainian drone flew all that distance, or that it was launched by special operations close by. Exact details are not known yet, and of course I have not seen any proof that this actually happened and that a plane was actually destroyed or damaged. There were rumors that Romania shot down Shahid drones with its Gepard SPAAs, but after those drones had entered Romanian territory, some claims were even that they shot down drones while they were still on the Ukrainian side. But claims I read from the Romanian sides are that this is not possible legally without a state of emergency in the country. So legally it would not be allowed. And as from what I've seen, there is now a dementi. The Romanian government is saying this is not true. They have not shot it down. Now, while there are videos circulating of a destroyed likely a destroyed Shahid, and probably on the Romanian side, while there is video about the acoustic, about the sounds likely of a Gepard SPAA, the reason is probably simple. It was a Ukrainian one on the Ukrainian side, if we want to believe the Romanian government in this context. We have an interesting picture here in this context too, which shows the recent attacks on the Ukrainian side with Shahid drones, where you can see the mission planning, how it is done. And while strikes always take some time in preparation, because they aim to avoid air defense systems where possible. Here, for instance, you can see that obviously the Russians plan to have it fly over as little Russian controlled territory as possible in case one of those drones crashes. And then you see it's passing right between Odessa and Kherson, so probably 2 points where air defense is mostly concentrated. It's passing through to then go to, that should be Zhytomyr, passing developed areas where the air defense will be concentrated to avoid strikes in this regard. We can see this here nicely too, that they flew south over the Black Sea to avoid damage on the ground in case one of them fails. And even though this makes sense, this here I can't really explain, except that was maybe there to jam or to distract the Ukrainians. I have no idea. Still though, the pictures here illustrate nicely how mission planning is being done. We have on the northern front, the only thing that seems to be worth reporting is that there are claims almost daily of fighting at Solnitsky Kozachok up here. Again and again, Russians are claiming that they've crossed, which is, to be honest, fairly possible, as this is right on the border. This here is 50 meters away. So a jog back and forth takes 15 seconds, and then you've entered Solnitsky Kozachok and can claim you've been in that town, as the Ukrainians likely do not have permanent presence here. So while the Russian activity there remains. As of now, I do not see any serious claims that the Russians are currently occupying the town, so they seem to make raids into it and leave afterwards. There are fresh geolocations from Liboke, but they more or less just show what I said in the last situation report. We have the Russians here and we have the Russians here. My assessment is that the front line is probably at this point more or less, like I said last time, I consider Liboke to be in Russian hands from what I've seen in the geolocations, no matter what the deep state map says here. At Vovchansk, I have no change that I can report. So let's switch over to the Eastern Front, and here nothing has changed as well, except for an area down here at Dibrova. Roughly this part inside of the forest has been captured by the Russians. This is, I'm not sure this still counts for the Serebryanske forest or if it's only this one here, but they gained some position in a forested area right west of Dibrova. Let's switch to the area south of the Siversky Donetsk, and here the Russians have had some success in Zalisne. They managed to reach to that point here, and Zalisne is in the direction of Toretsk, so no change. I can confirm no fresh change in that whole area, and as said, the situation about Ivanova Darivka is still unclear, as the Russians have been inside of the town, so what came out of this, unfortunately, I cannot tell as of now. So in Zalisne, the Russians managed to advance. They managed to advance roughly up till here. So this here, which means that while it's unclear whether they managed to solidify themselves, it shows that the Ukrainians have been pushed back until this part. So the center of Zalisne is more or less, at the very least, a contested area, if not under Russian control as of now. If we go to the area of Avdiivka, we have a small Russian advance in New York. Here in that area, the Russians managed to advance somewhat to the west along the windbreaker tree line here, but that is the only confirmed change in the area of New York that I have. We have significant changes here at Prohres and Lozovatske. Here we had in the last situation report a Cauldron developing more or less like this. By now, the Ukrainians claim that they managed to break out in a nightly breakout attempt and that the troops were able to evacuate. Obviously, we have no information how costly that breakout was or if it was costly at all, but we also do not see any visual evidence of significant Ukrainian prisoners of war that would indicate that they had capitulated, so them breaking out is likely the result. Still though, the development was not good. The Russians more or less captured this area here. Not quite to that extent, but probably in this regard here, I think until here they were. So this should be fresh Russian control. They also managed to take roughly this here. So the whole area where the Ukrainians prior were, but the more significant advance is more or less everything past here. So if I do it again, the Russians gained Vovche. They have taken it, and they already reached the outskirts of Vesele. So all this area is now under Russian control as well. They advanced by several kilometers along the railroad line towards the west in this area here. Then we have developments further south. The Russians have achieved progress in the area. No, that was, I'm sorry, I forgot the geolocation here. I'm sorry, here we have them west of Lozovatske, which is showing them that should have been here. No, I think it was here. I apologize, it was up to here. So it was one of the geolocations showing the recent advances by the Russians, where they have achieved success west of Lozovatske. The good news for Ukrainians is so far at Vostvychenka, we do not see any Russian success. This is obviously important, as this line of communication has to be kept open as long as possible from the Ukrainian side. The Ukrainians lost additional positions at Yasnobrodivka here. We had them recently in this area here. We had them here geolocated, and we have a fresh geolocation now at this point where a Russian soldier is waving a flag. This should be more or less here. So the Russians have more or less taken Yasnobrodivka. If we look on the map here, we see that I guess there is still a house or two further north, but the whole town seems to be a mere handful of buildings, some of them unfinished. and this is now under Russian control as well. The next change we have is in Krasnohorivka. Here the Russians managed to advance into the north, and they have reached this point here. This is at this position here. So at this point now, the Ukrainians are losing the last east-west connection in Krasnohorivka. I guess it's not, you don't have to be a prophet to say that Krasnohorivka is about to fall completely into the Russian hand, which timetable is obviously impossible to guess, but it can't be that long anymore. The Russians have mostly consolidated their control, and it's increasing towards close to 95% at this point. Further south, the Ukrainians report a big attack by the Russians on the town of Konstantinivka. The Russians attacked in this direction here, according to Ukrainian claims, with 11 tanks, 45 IFVs and APCs, 1 BMPT, that's the Terminator, and 12 motorcycles. The video the Ukrainians published do only show a fraction of those units, so to which degree the numbers are correct I cannot say, and I cannot confirm either what the Ukrainians said, that they managed to destroy 2 tanks. Sorry, they managed to destroy 6 tanks, 7 APCs, IFVs, and all 12 motorcycles. Those are the claims. I cannot confirm this by the look on the video itself, but that's the Ukrainian claims. This is being one of the bigger Russian attacks, as said, with over 50 armored vehicles. In this context, a bigger attack in the last few months. The Russians have definitely reached the outskirts of Konstantinivka. We have a geolocation right at the southeastern tip here, but as of now, I do not see that there is any confirmation that they managed to take a hold of the position, that they are still in control of it. As said, the video shows the Ukrainians defeating the Russian column, but it doesn't show the full extent, and it wouldn't be the first time that we see videos cut in a way that shows one side winning while it's actually losing. But at least as of now, the only confirmation we have is the Russians at this point, not further into Konstantinivka. At the whole southern area, I do not have any change until we are south of Orikhiv, and here we have a quite significant advance by the Russians on that main road south of Malatokmachka. Here we have the Russians reaching this point, and it's easy to identify. We have this shape here, which is this one here, and then it is the second tree line to the east. So at this point, the Russians have reached down here by now. So probably this should be considered in Russian hands as of now. While this does, we are nowhere close to having to fear that the units here in the south are going to be cut off, but it shows that the Russians are still having offensive operations there, and that they are successful, at least to a certain degree. The overall situation, we have comments from General Syrskyi, who is the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces. He said that Russia has currently 520,000 soldiers participating in the war, and they plan to increase that to 670,000 until the end of 2024. The Russians right now are having a 1-to-2 or a 1-to-3 superiority in manpower. The Russians have doubled the number of tanks and IFVs along the front line, and they've tripled the number of artillery since the beginning of the war. So despite the heavy losses, despite the depots being emptied, or maybe because the depots are being emptied, according to Syrskyi, the Russians actually managed to increase their strength in the Ukrainian theater, while obviously the Ukrainians are struggling to keep up with all of this. Frontelligence, which is a Ukrainian think tank or publishing, they do analysis basically. They are saying, during June and early July, our team observed the movement of hundreds of vehicles from various parts of Russia towards Ukraine. Most of these vehicles were older models, likely restored and in some cases modernized, such as T-62 and T-55, BMP-1s and BTR 7080, with very few MTLBs. These vehicles have not yet made a noticeable appearance on the battlefield, suggesting they may either be assigned to new units being formed by the Russian army or are intended for future use later this year. So basically, the Ukrainian think tank is saying that the Russians are either building reserves right now for attacks later, or they are creating fresh units that are getting supplied with, in quotation mark, new material, while the front line is still active and the Russians are still building up. So this shows the struggling situations the Ukrainians are facing as of right now. We have news from sabotage. This is not in a direct connection, even though there are claims. There was at the beginning of the Olympic Games, there were sabotage attempts and successful sabotage on high-speed rails in France. We see 3 places where it was successful and a 4th one failed because workers saw them and the perpetrators fled. This is right now, as of right now, it's unclear to the public who it was. Israel apparently said they believe that Iran was behind it. The French seem to think it's probably left-wing extremism, and a ton of comments are that this must have been Russia, as Russia was sabotaging the railroad lines before, and at this would fit their plate. But at least at the end of the research for this episode, I did not see that there's any clear evidence who's having the fault for this. We go to the troop generation from both sides. We have from the Russians, we just have additional news that the next oblasts are raising the prizes, the signing bonuses. But what we have here is an example for this wasn't it this year, of the Ukrainians doing something against corruption. This is the reports that they arrested recruitment officers who took bribes. As you can see it here presented, people can buy their basically disability, I guess. So the recruitment office will say they are incapable of serving for $5,000 to $15,000. This is being offered in obviously through corruption in Ukraine. This is a topic that's not new, and while this looks impressive, a look for a moment shows that it's the single dollar bills and single euro bills that just being put after each other to make it look more impressive. So while that's still a fair amount of money, it's far less than it initially looks like. If you think this, you probably think about something like Breaking Bad, the famous scene in the storage unit. We are far from that in this point. The Ukrainians are still having trouble though. Frontelligence in that article, they're also saying that the Ukrainians have trouble with generating fresh personnel. So while we have reports that the recruitment is going well, they said that a lot of units on the front line don't receive enough or even no personnel. A representative of a mechanized brigade told them they have not received a single person as replacement, and they assume that fresh recruits are being sent into fresh brigades that are being built, that are being set up. The Ukrainians have reported a number of fresh brigades that they are currently building, and they are apparently seem to prioritize fresh units towards for the fresh manpower, and not the existing units, and that obviously leaves the question why. Now, I cannot answer that for you, but this is a weird decision by the Ukrainians for which there is probably some rational explanation, which I do not really understand at that point. Then we have news from Russia. Another deputy defense minister, a prior deputy defense minister, was arrested for corruption. General Dmitry Bulgakov. He is being accused of having given an order to a food company to supply the Russian army with food of low quality at inflated prices, and thus has enriched himself. He was in office from 2008 until September 2022 and was responsible for military logistics, and that's probably why he was only in office until September 2022, because the logistics of the invasion was his responsibility as well. The Russians are also saying that currently YouTube is being slowed down by 40%, supposedly because of some server lacking of servers, but it seems more that it's meant to make it less attractive to use YouTube and to assert pressure on Google, probably to do the censorship for the Russian government, that YouTube simply blocks videos that the Russian government doesn't want to have, as YouTube does in other countries as well. Then there's international support. Ukraine has received the first 1.5 billion euros from the proceeds from the frozen Russian money inside of Europe. The Pentagon has found another 2 billion accounting error when it comes to international aid. So that should mean they can send another 2 billion aid that was already confirmed and already given permission to. And Spain is going to send a fresh aid package in September. Part of that package will be a full functional and operational Hawk battery, so a Hawk air defense system which might be obsolete but is absolutely adequate to shoot down cruise missiles and drones over Ukraine. So fresh aid for the Ukrainian air defense. And finally, something weird, we have a Russian howitzer having slat armor and ERA. Don't ask me what the reason behind that is and how that's supposed to help, but that's the modifications along the front line that we can see here. That was it for this video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. Leave a comment what you think about the current developments. And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. This channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. Thank you very much to everyone already supporting this channel. And I almost forgot it because some viewers were insanely generous again. I want to thank Adam Ruth for the chopper boys that he sent me from my Amazon wish list, which is in the description. He also sent me the Biafra story, the making of an African legend. Thank you very much for that book here as well. He also sent me, no, that's not from him. He sent me Noam Chomsky, Hegemony or Survival. Thank you very much for this as well, but I think that wasn't even all yet. No. Michael Shiozaki sent me a study of history, abridgment of volumes 1 to 6 by D.C. Somerville from Arnold J. Toynbee. Thank you very much. I appreciate the work and honesty you put into your videos. Thank you for what you're doing and don't stop. Thank you very much for the compliment and the book, the present. And I think I have one more from Adam Ruth. Yes. A Century of War, Anglo-American Oil Politics and the New World Order. Thank you very much for that book as well. You've been very generous with your support. Thank you so much for that. I sometimes say that when I emigrated, the one really sad thing was that I had to give up my library, and you guys are helping me rebuild it again. So thank you very much. If you want to support the channel, you can find the means for it in the description. But that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.